This year was probably the most stacked year in gaming history. I mean it. People love to say 1998 was the best year, but I legitimately think that 2023 was the ultimate year in gaming if you consider the indie successes as well as the AAA franchises getting new entries and remakes. Now, I think that this was due to COVID slowing productivity for game makers, and games that would have been released earlier, they all kind of had to wait until this year, but that's just my turtle brain cooking up theories. Don't trust me as a source for anything industry related unless I'm directly quoting somebody. The point is, I'm feeling kind of nostalgic about 2023 and it's about over, and I wanted to share my personal top titles of the most stacked year in gaming release history. I'm Solace, this is Solace and Dread. We produce analytical content as well as reaction videos primarily focused on Square Enix, Nintendo, and Capcom publications. Alright, starting with number 5 and counting down from there. Spider-Man 2. The Solace. Now, I didn't cover this on the channel, but I did play through it and platinum it. It's actually one of the few platinum trophies I got. It's got great stories, great visuals, and the performances are top tier. The combat felt different between the Spider-Men, and by the way, Miles is better than Peter. And the combat was almost never too easy. Your boy died a lot. The side quests were fun or gripping, and Venom was finally well done. And there were exciting cameos for future games. So that leaves us with the Dread. There were far too many similarities to past games until Venom shows up and the black suit starts to get more involved. It's got the weakest ending of the 3 games, and the Mary Jane segments. Yes, they were better than the previous entry with MJ, but frankly, they were still the lowest points of the entire gameplay. So yeah, they're still awful. I don't know why they keep shoehorning that in. If it didn't work the first time, why are you still trying to put that in? Nobody says, oh, I love the parts where you play with MJ. It's just so good. It sucked. Anyway, it was better, but it's still awful. And there were some odd writing choices for Miles. I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty. I didn't like some of the choices that they made for Miles. And then lastly, the bugs. Yeah, they were mostly minor, but the ones that reared their ugly heads, they were usually game breaking. Like you got trapped in an area. I don't know. Anyway, I'm not gonna get into the nitty gritty, but often you usually had to restart the game in order to even fix it. And with a game budget that large, that's kind of crazy. Also, the soundtrack was mid. Sorry. Number 4, Final Fantasy 16. The Solace. It has my favorite Final Fantasy moments. The Bahamut fight was the best and my favorite boss fight in any video game I have ever experienced, ever. It doesn't really get any better than that for me. I've never been more hyped during a boss fight in my entire life. The scale and the spectacle for many of the icon fights was on par with like big budget action movies like Avengers and shit. I've never seen anything quite like that in a Final Fantasy before. But the Dread is, of course, it's also got the lowest lows of any Final Fantasy as well. The vast majority of the side quests were boring, sorry to say, and the entirety of the gameplay was combat or listening to rather long-winded dialogue, even if it was acted very well. I made a number of videos on this channel absolutely dunking on Final Fantasy 16, and despite that, we were still largely complimentary of the game. If you were to just look at the thumbnails and the titles of the videos we've produced, you would never know that this is actually one of my top 15-ish games of all time. It's unfortunate that that's just works to get clicks on YouTube. I don't hate the game, not the player. Number 3, Tears of the Kingdom. Another game that we made several videos absolutely shitting on it, but we do love it. Anyway, The Solace. As my wife says, Tears of the Kingdom is what Breath of the Wild should have been. It took all of the good stuff that Breath of the Wild did and made it better in almost every single way. I love what this game did in terms of gameplay. Side quests are never better than this in previous games or in, honestly, most of the RPGs that I've ever played. It made visible and lasting impressions on the towns that were involved with the side quests and with the world in general. I think that some of the things that they did in this game should probably be used in future Zelda titles as well as other games in general. This is really a great case study for how to make video games, even if I am personally getting open world burnout. Now there's the dread. The storytelling and the story itself was kind of weak, and Aonuma doesn't really care about the continuity of the universe that they have created, as he's all but plainly stated. And yeah, the ending was disappointing because it was extremely predictable. From the moment the big thing happens, you knew how it was going to end because they always play it a little too safe with Zelda. This take triggered many of our viewers, but I still stand by it. The Zelda fan base is a little rabid, man. Anyway, number 2, Star Ocean 2. Now, I've done like 10 videos on this game, so I'll keep my thoughts kind of high level. The solace is that this is probably one of the greatest JRPG remakes of all time, doing enough to change the initial formula without completely perverting the original. This is the perfect balance of nostalgia and newness that every other company should study for future remakes of classic games. The dread, however, is that some of the changes that they made make things just a little bit too easy. Star Ocean 2 is known for its difficulty, and this version of it made even the hardest parts of the game far too approachable. Item creation is just so expansive in this one that it's really hard to find a challenge anymore without intentionally stunting or ignoring parts of the game to make it harder yourself. And by that extension, what is the point of the harder difficulties? That said, many new players of the game loved everything about it, and I think that 1, that's important to consider, and 2, this could mean love for the franchise in the future from Square Enix. And hopefully, by the way, this also means that we get a remake of Star Ocean Blue Sphere. Sign my petition, link is in the description, please. And of course, number 1, I mean, is this really even a surprise to anyone? Mario RPG, the Solace. It's so beautiful. Art Piazza really outdid themselves. This paid perfect homage to the original game and made longtime fans emotional with this release, myself included. I don't think I have ever happy cried this much from a game ever in my life. And I don't know that I ever will again. Maybe Chrono Trigger. That's probably as close as it'll ever come. And I felt validated in my feelings when everyone else kept telling me that they had never played the original and they felt the same way that I did and had those emotional moments as well. Not to mention the game itself was just masterfully crafted and was just honestly one of the most beautiful games I've ever seen on the Switch. The dread, they didn't change enough. The problem with the remakes of games kind of like this one is that the original still holds up extremely well. So when you make a remake, you need to make sure that you're changing the formula enough that it's a fresh experience for the veteran players that made it such a well-performing classic title to begin with. Mario RPG kind of failed in that regard, despite the new post-game content. Still, it's a remake of my favorite game of all time, and it's absolutely amazing. And it was my game of the year, not even a question. Maybe game of the decade, I don't know. Maybe game of the past decade and future decade. I don't know. Anyway, linking everything together with release schedules like this and how incredibly stacked this was, I don't think we'll ever see the stars align quite like this in a calendar year for at least another 10 years. But who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. Also, if you're wondering why games like Baldur's Gate and maybe Sea of Stars weren't mentioned, is because I didn't really dedicate enough time to them to be able to rate them. I barely touched them, and especially Baldur's Gate 3. I legitimately put like 3 hours into the game, and at first it had some unforgivable issues, like not being able to boot multiplayer characters that joined your party. That was kind of bad, but I know they fixed it. I will go back this year. That is the plan. Anyway, I just wanted to make this as some kind of personal testament and a recording of my favorite year in gaming so that I never, ever forget. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon, and long live the Turtle Kingdom.